All right, welcome everybody to Thursday. What is the date today? The 8th? October 8th edition of Success in Sales Training. Thank you very much for joining us today, whether you're live. I know that we have a new meeting ID, and I hope it wasn't cumbersome for you to join, but hopefully if you had a tough time joining live, you'll visit us on the replay. So happy Thursday to everybody. I started last week. We talk a lot about, we're reading this connection book, Leandro. It's all a lot about humor, right? And it's such an engaging quality, and it's such a connection. There's certain things that are repellents, and there's certain things that are attractors, and certainly humor is a great teacher and a great attraction factor. So I implemented a few jokes last week. If you haven't heard them, they're actually pretty. I started with some pretty good ones. I probably should have let those sit, but I do have another joke today. We'll start, as Joel Osteen would say, I like to start with something funny. And, okay, so a married woman, all right, Leandro, I'm gonna look at you. A married woman stays out all night. She comes back the next morning. Husband's like, where you been? She said, I stayed with a friend last night. He calls her 10 best friends, and none of them have any idea of what he's talking about. So later he stays out all night, and he comes back the next morning. The wife's like, where you been? And he goes, I stayed with a friend. She called 10 of his best friends, 8 of which confirmed that he did sleep over, and 2 said that he was still there. Right? It's that old bros before, right? Yeah. All right. So anyway, that's the joke. I might even have another one for you. Depends on how I feel. All right. So listen. When I start putting these things together, I start thinking about what's the messaging. Certainly, everyone can read the book. I know I've talked in the past that I've been part of book clubs where everybody kind of shares what they got out of each chapter or each section that we're going through. This is a little bit different. And sometimes I really kind of stick by the book, and you'll actually see, follow me. It's almost like I'm working through the chapter. Sometimes I really pull away from it. Today, this chapter 8, is about connectors create an experience, and it's really a lot about public speaking, but we can absolutely glean a ton of very valuable information. Hold on just a second. Okay, we can get a ton of very valuable information out of this, even though it is kind of geared toward public speaking. But when I first sit down, I kind of reflect back, and Leandro, what I can do is kind of look at the previous files that we've saved of my notes, and I just meditate over that for a minute or two. I don't sit around for a long time. But today, as I meditated, I was putting my notes, finalizing my notes, I really had a hope, and I guess I call it a prayer, that you have a big why. That the why is not so much about you, but about others, about a lifestyle, about what we can produce in our life, about being the best us, having a why outside of money. I hope you spent some time this week in quadrant 2. I hope and pray that every day you make it a point to, develop yourself for so many reasons, right, Leandro? We've talked the law of the lid. We talked, so many reasons that we need to develop ourselves each day. And quadrant 2 isn't just reading and learning and so forth. It's, you got some people in the waiting room. It's not just reading and learning and developing. That's certainly part of it, but that's where we plan. That's where we meditate. That's where we schedule. That's where we invest in relationships. That's where we take our time and kind of walk slowly through life, right? Enjoy the fruit of life, and not so much quadrant 1 where everything is urgent always. And it breaks my heart when I see people that live like that, although some people kind of identify themselves by one drama after another, right? One urgency after another. So anyway, I hope you're pouring yourselves into others, and that quadrant 2 time is time for us to pour back, to be poured into. So let's hope that this time is that. It certainly has been for me as I've been putting together these notes. There's a few things that I pulled out of here. One of the things I like, and he's talking about being a preacher, and you guys might know that both my grandfathers were preachers, and they had my one poppy had a kind of a rule, which is if you can't get it, if you can't identify what you're trying to say in 20 minutes, then you're not doing it right. So John talks about how he felt like he was a pretty boring preacher when he first started, and tells a pretty cute story about either his kid, or I think it was his grandkid or his kid. Oh, perfect. Thank you. Either his grandkid or his kid. And anyway, this little poem I really like. Now I lay me down to sleep. The sermon is long. The subject is deep. If he should quit before I wake, I ask someone, give me a shake. And I sat and I wondered, and I thought back, and I know I've shared with you guys a lot my speaking history and some of the maturations that I've gone through in understanding that it's less about what I say and more about how it's received. And a lot of this chapter is about that. So it really spoke to me, and it's neat. And like I said, I think I read this book about 10 or 12 years ago. So I don't remember expressly this book. I know that this book was meaningful, which is why I chose to read it with you all again. But I think that maybe this book was part of that, turning that maturation, because I can definitely read some of the things that John puts in here when he was a young preacher or a young speaker, and definitely identify with it. So this is where, and I do remember that this is the convention that I went to. This is the book that he was promoting when he said that you can develop creativity. And I remember, I think I've told you guys, that just blew my mind. I thought, man, I know I can develop how to, hit a baseball better, but to develop creativity. And he's right. And I would say that developing creativity, developing the ability to be interesting is how he points it down into this chapter. And being interesting is kind of a subjective question, or a subjective term, interesting. But I would say that our experiences make us interesting. And I know I talk a lot about how we've talked a little bit about resilient people and how they respond to adversity, right? And I think a lot of people, they want to avoid failure, they want to avoid adversity, they want to avoid the rough spots in life, and that's certainly human condition. And I feel the same way most of the time. But the reality is, when I look back, some of the tough times, like where I had to make some real life adjustments, and it tested my marriage and it tested my relationships, to the good struggles, which is like being in Nicaragua, right? You're not feeling good, and it's hard, but it's so rewarding. And those tough experiences are the biggest stories in my life. They're the reason for the biggest changes. And we just talked about this. I was chatting with Glenn Brown before we started about how he's having to make adjustments, based on the landscape changing. And I mentioned a pastor friend of mine that works in Nicaragua had to make a real adjustment in getting acquainted with computers and how to use them and communicate with that because of the COVID and the distancing and so forth. So those experiences, if you're in it, and I think I said this a couple of weeks ago, if you're in the middle of a struggle right now, if you're dealing with some serious adversity in your life right now, I hope that that your perspective at least allows you to identify that experience, once you get through it, it will serve as a key to doors that you can walk in and influence people because you've had the experience, because you're authentic, because you've been through it, right? And you can help people get through the same types of adversity. So experiences make us interesting. Studying and learning certainly make us interesting. We talked about that. We pay money to go hear people speak that are very knowledgeable or learning on a topic that's important to us. So when we study and we learn and we're able to share that information that we learn, my wife's the best at it. If she gets fired up about something, everybody's going to hear about it. We went to, I'll tell you, it says tell stories. So I'm going to tell a story. We went to Naples for a baseball tournament, and we went to this supermarket called Seed to Table. And I got to tell you, I didn't go in it, but outside of it was amazing. Just pumpkins and beautiful flowers, the most amazing front fascia of any grocery store I've ever seen. She walks in, she comes out and is blown away, is taking pictures of the produce section. I mean, it really, based on her experience, it really was neat. But before you knew it, she was talking to my buddy's dad, Bill, about it and showing him pictures, and talking to another mother and showing her. I mean, like, everybody at the park knew about that place because she shared the experience, right? It was, anyway, I think that's funny, the way Stacy, man, she learned something, she's going to share it with you. Being around interesting people. I mean, associate with people that you find interesting. Why not? I love being around interesting people. So put ourselves on the right side of human behavior. If you want to be interesting, you first have to be interested, right? Show genuine interest in people. Have a genuine curiosity about the things. And as we go through this, and Leandra, I'm running a little behind, buddy.
Okay. No, you're fine.
You should have seen Leandra's like, what? See the good things. And see the good in things and be positive. But we've talked about that. Don't ignore, don't be this rigid, hey, everything's great, because sooner or later you're going to break down. Don't ignore the emotions, but see the good in things. Resilient people see the positive in things. Resilient people expect that adversity is going to come our way, right? I love it when somebody says, well, why me? It's like, well, why not? We all have, we're all, the old saying, if you're not in the middle of a situation, you're coming out of one or you're getting ready to go into one. But there's always something that you have to work through. And I was talking to my son about it. It's like you really just want to try to find the good in something and the positive. And I've identified, even through the most miserable situations in my life, have proved to be the most positive for my growth and my maturation. We're either taught how to do things or taught how not to do things, right? So it just depends on how we look at it. When I say put ourselves on the right side of human behavior, I'm talking about remember that hypothetical of being pulled over by a police officer, and one, reaction is, hey, what the hell? I pay your salary. Don't you know who I am? And the other is you roll all your windows down, you put your hands at 10 and 2 with your fingers up, which is going to produce a better reaction for you. So when I say put yourself on the right side of human behavior, there's certain things that we know to be true. It's almost like my son not making 100 on an open note quiz. It's like, that's a layup. That's a given. Homework, just turn it in and get 100. If you don't get 100, it's like you're missing it. And some of these things, I feel like people miss it. We have to be interesting when we talk to people. We have to be energetic. We have to be positive. We have to have facial expressions, and our tone and our cadence matter. In the end, if you want to hit the baseball, you start with your approach. And the approach is just caring about people. I mean, literally just being thoughtful of, hey, I have a message that I think I want to give to somebody based on their reaction. We're going to get into that, how to ask great questions so that you identify exactly what's important to them, right? It's hard to be interesting if you're talking about things that people don't find interesting. And there's a couple of quotes in here, and I don't want to get ahead of myself. But in the end, someone's attention is our responsibility, right? It's not their responsibility. It's our responsibility to keep someone's attention. And there's tons of stuff in here about, like here it is. I'm just going to read this from page 178. On average, prospects retain only half what we tell them. Before an hour has passed, they lose 10% of the little originally knew. After sleeping on it, guess what? Another 20% evaporates. By the time the breakfast rush has subsided, they have avoided 2 near collisions on a freeway, found notes in their desks from their bosses, and forgotten another 10%. So the entire time we've assumed that the prospect's thinking about our proposal, he or she is forgetting about it. That's humbling, because I can't tell you how many times, like, man, I gave that big proposal, I can't wait to get a call back, and you're staring at the phone, and you realize, and my dad taught me this, we were waiting on funding from a church that we had done, excuse me, through a bond program. So the funding process was a little bit different. And I remember, I forget the name of our contact, but anyway, I was trying to call him and I couldn't get in touch with him. I was like, Dad, man, I can't get in touch with this guy. And he goes, son, those people are busy. We're not. So perspective's very different. So to connect with others in the world, I'm reading this too. This is the only part I'm actually reading verbatim, but I thought it was really good. To connect with others in this world, you can't just live in your own world. You have to link what you have to link what you want to say to what others' needs are. People don't remember what we think is important. They remember what they think is important. I was asked, I had a business meeting with a few guys yesterday, and they're getting ready to pitch their business. And we're going to be working with them and have in the past, really great guys, and asked my opinion. How would you pitch this? How did he say, how would you package this? And I said, I wouldn't. And they looked at me like, what do you mean you wouldn't? I go, how do you know it's important to that guy or gal that you're going to talk to? So I always have said, I want to be very well prepared when I go into a pitch or a sale or anything like that, or I want to be very well prepared, but I also want it to be a blank canvas, because I know for a fact, in retrospect, I have put a prospect in a box with a solution that I think's for them. I didn't ask questions. I didn't identify if that was the right path for them. And then I lead them down that path, and doesn't lead them where they want to go. So I missed the sale. So I told my buddies, I said, you need to ask what's important to them. If it's, in this case, that I can almost guarantee you the data is going to be important. In this case, I think the monetary value, I think the monetary spin on it's more important if the conditions are like so. I said, so the best thing you can do is go in and ask great questions, be great listeners, and be so knowledgeable on your product and or service that you can put those pieces together, and then you can start creating a link between what we say to what they need. But you don't know what they need until you ask. And I think so many say, and I know we're not talking about sales only, but I know for a fact, so many salespeople miss that. They're so interested in giving information and they don't even know or consider, is that information interesting to the ear to whom they're giving it? And most of the time it's not. I put in here several times, and I say it a lot, we're emotional beings as humans before we're analytical. We are emotional before we're analytical. And I think so many people try an analytical approach to start with that. Certainly you should have your analytics. Certainly you should know your numbers and be knowledgeable of those statistics. But that's not what we lead with, right? They don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. That's a true statement. I even wrote that down. Like I highlighted here, but I literally typed those words out. To connect with others in their world, you can't live in your own world. I mean, I just think that you talk about approach being right. That's an approach statement, right? Okay. I love the way this is all really starting to come together. When we care for people, and listen, I get this wrong a lot. So this isn't, the sensei showing you how to do a kick that I've done 100 million times and do it perfectly every time. But when we care and value other people and we put their needs in front of our own needs, that's when magic starts happening. And what does it look like to not do that? If you're thinking about commission, if you're thinking about, or I remember it's not even commission. I remember one sales life I had where it was all about leaderboards. And when I was going to see a client or a prospect, I wasn't thinking about their well-being, Leandro. I was thinking I want to be on top of the leaderboard. I'm not even kidding you. I mean, it was like, that's all I thought. And totally to a fault. So the question I started asking myself when I realized it right before I left, of course, I started figuring it out right before I left. But it was that organization that really taught this self-development. So that's why I learned it. But I started asking myself, am I worried, is X my concern, or is bringing value to this person my approach or my focus? So those are the questions we need to ask. And that's why it gets really hard, especially if you're like a grinder salesperson. It's kind of like, being a batter in a baseball game, right? Once you start getting in a slump, man, it's all about confidence. And you lose your confidence, and it's like, remember what was that, Austin Powers, I eat because I'm unhappy. I'm unhappy because I eat. It's a vicious cycle. That's the way this is. Like you can't make a sale, and all of a sudden you start gripping and you start thinking about money and you start thinking about things that are revolved around us, which is human. And that serves to further the cycle, the vicious cycle. I eat because I'm unhappy. That's why we ask great questions. We want our words to have a direct link to the person's need or want. And the only way to find out what they need or want is to ask great questions, to be genuinely curious about about the answers to your question. Be great listeners. And when I say listening, I don't mean like just hear and retain. Listening's a physical thing. I mean, if somebody's talking to you about something that's personal, and you even do this, you even do that, you're done. And I think it puts it all in perspective when we read a chapter like this, and we really, because all it takes is a little focus to understand, especially after I read, the 20%, 10%, we only have 10% to work with. When you start understanding that, then the value of how we communicate, the value of how we approach somebody really amps up. And then it's like, I don't even care about the facts right now of what I have. I need to find out which of these 10 features and benefits, which 2 are going to be appropriate for this person, right? I don't want to go in and say all 10. I certainly don't want to assume the 2, right? I need to find that out. And I'm telling you, you can't ask enough questions until, of course, you got to balance things. I feel like I always say the safety word, which is people's time is valuable. We've talked about that. Mark Twain, right? Need 24 days to write one page, can write 24 pages in a day. It's harder to condense into very succinct, comprehensible ideas and not ramble on. And most of the time we're rambling on because we're not thinking about our communication. We're not thinking about the other person. Our focus is wrong. At least that's my thing. I don't think it's easy to bring value or to be, as my buddy John, a guy I used to associate with, called it being meaningful, specific in somebody's life. Like not just, and his thing was not like, hey, can I do anything to help? It's like, care enough, pay attention enough, and see a need and say, hey, I'll do that for you. Be meaningful, specific in someone's life. Hey, at our church, if somebody has a baby or someone passes, like, they sign up for dinners, right? Hey, so-and-so needs this, and people bring dinners to you, right? How cool is that? I think we ought to do that CBD BioCare. I'm going to just like make up an adversity and see if people send me dinner. So in that scenario, it's not like, hey, can I bring you dinner? If I know you're dealing, like you have a husband in the hospital or a spouse or whatever, and something going on, and it's like, hey, can I bring you dinner? That's cool. But what night can I bring you dinner? Is Tuesday good or is Wednesday better? That's meaningful, specific. So when I say meaningful, specific, I wanted to give a few examples of exactly what that meant. He talks about some really basic stuff in here that honestly, the basics matter. Vince Lombardi, who won the Super Bowl with the greatest group of football players in the world, came back the very next year, first day of practice, and he holds up a football and he goes, gentlemen, this is a football. Telling the greatest football players in the world that it's a football. John Wooden took a page and a half out of his book to talk about how he would teach his kids how to properly put on socks and what a proper shoe, how it's laced up and how it should feel. And somebody asked John, he said, why do you spend a whole practice? And I'm telling you, you take your index finger and you roll the sock and you pull with tension over the heel. Very, very specific about the very basic function of putting on a shoe. And they said, why do you do that? He said, well, a lot of my kids come from the inner city. Most of their shoes, honestly, are hand-me-downs from their older siblings, or they never felt what a real fitting shoe feels like. And listen, that's something, although be it small, blisters might be a small thing to you, but it's something we can control. And if they have blistered feet and they don't have proper shoes, it's going to affect their play. I don't think anybody would deny that. So going over the basics is a good thing. Introduce yourself to people. In the COVID world, I always used to, hey, my name is Matthew Pitts. Obviously, we got to tweak things, but introduce yourself to people. Tell them your name. When they tell you their name, say it back to them. Say it in your head. Use it in a future sentence so that it ensconces itself into your mind. Everybody can remember names. The person who says they can't remember names is deluding him or herself, because it's really that it just doesn't matter enough. If it matters enough, you'll do it. So introduce yourself, relax, be yourself, especially talking to people who maybe have just joined us or you're starting something new. It doesn't matter. You're not less of a person because you're new and you don't know as many facts as somebody else. Relax and be yourself and remember that fire your representative? Don't let that dude or dudette hang out in front of you. Get them out of the way. Expose yourself for two reasons. One, you're not going to connect with people if you're not authentic. That's just the reality of it. And two, how do you get better? Like, how do you react and make adjustments we know who we are. That's a solid point in the equation, right? Every equation needs a given, needs a solid state. So, but the facade is a moving target. So you can't correct your representative. You can only correct yourself, and you can't correct yourself unless yourself is going through and they're seeing the real you, the buttery middle and the crumbs, right? From my toast analogy.
Yes, that's right.
Maybe everybody's a piece of toast, right? Everybody's got buttery middle, part they like. Everybody's got crust. Some people like crust, some people don't like crust. but all of them like have the junk in the bottom of the toaster. We all have that too. So, all right. Create humor. Again, he brings up humor. I think the easiest way for this is not like, hey, crack a joke every time you see somebody, but what I got out of it is don't take myself too seriously. Don't take myself too seriously. And that really comes as self-worth increases, the ability to not take ourselves too seriously and be authentically self-deprecating. It gets easier. So if you have a really hard time, it really probably is a confidence issue. And there's a lot of books and things you can do to really increase your confidence so that you feel confident, walking up and introducing yourself to someone. You feel confident to be relaxed and be yourself, flaws and all. You feel comfortable in self-doubt. Not that you want to, hey, I suck, aren't I funny? I'm not talking about that. Just not taking yourself too seriously. And I think a lot of us do. I certainly do. Seasons where it's easier to be kind of freewheeling, and sometimes under stress, I can, go the other way. So when you're with somebody, create a sense of anticipation. Once you identify, let's say a person says, I can't sleep. I haven't slept in 13 years. I can't sleep. Once you identify that that's what they're looking for, create the picture for them. What would it feel like? Do you remember what it's like to sleep all the way through the night? What do you think that's going to feel like when you can sleep all the way through the night? How would it feel to not have that back pain? How would it feel to have something you could take, get them? When we were in the life insurance business, we would say, hey, tell me what happens if John doesn't come home tonight. Just take a minute. What happens? You put them right in the picture, right? Mm-hmm. Here, thankfully, the picture is a lot more rosy. It's being pain-free. It's kids being helped. It's stress being helped. I mean, people with real issues that have an impact on the quality of their daily life. And that's why it's so important to care about people, because if that's your why, then man, you're not going to get commission breath very easily, right? We're all human. We all need a coach. We all have seasons where we're going to miss. All right. I'm running late today, man.
Victor Cristia says, one of the best features is that I do not take everything too seriously.
Nothing. Here's the thing. Remember I told you guys about the chainsaw stuff? Did I tell you about the chainsaw story? Oh my gosh. We worked for an organization, and we would do these big conventions. I'm talking massive conventions. And those are mainly the places where I got to speak to really, really large crowds outside of the church arena. And we would come back from those conventions. I mean, if you guys have ever been to a big convention, it's, there's a lot of energy. It's emotional. People make big decisions at big events. It's just, that's the human condition. So we would come back and we would ask everybody to share something that they got from the convention. And early on, I worked with this organization about 3 or 4 years, I think. Anyway, early on, there was a guy who came back from a convention and he goes, I can't believe this place. It would take a chainsaw to get me out of this company. A month later, he quit. So over the years, of course, we did, I think, at least 2 a year, 2 big ones a year. So we'd have, these sessions where we had business meetings. You got 50 people in a room, every one of them getting up that went to convention, sharing what they got out of it. And it got to the point where I remember, this happened several times, but one lady gets up, she goes, oh man, I have a dream. And listen, this is a very, like a larger Southern white girl, right? So if you big black hair, just, if you could kind of picture it. Oh, I had a dream and you're not going to take my dream. I ain't ever quitting this company. I looked over at Andy Riddle and I go, chainsaw. 3 weeks later, she quit. The point is, the people who get really emotionally high have the equal emotional lows. So, they say in sports psychology all the time. It's just, I'm watching this show called Ted Lasso on Apple Plus. You heard of it?
No.
Gotta watch it. Hilarious, fun, really cool show. And he asked one of his players, he tells him, he says, what's the animal that has the shortest memory span? A goldfish. So when they did something wrong, he said, be a goldfish, man. You got to have a short memory. So to your point, to Victor's point, actually, keeping that emotional, temperature, it's okay to be energized, but I'm telling you, It's the people that go way extreme here. It's the yin and the yang, right? It's the action reaction. It's the ripple of butterfly effect, whatever you want to call it. Stay level. Stay level. Don't let, and it's easier for me to say, I happen to be a man of faith. I don't know how I couldn't counsel someone not, because that's what I lean on, to stay level, so that when things are really kind of coming down, I'm not getting, I'm not getting too down, right? Can't. Okay. Man, Leandro, I got a little bit more. Oh, look, no, there it is. We're right on time, man. I'm a few minutes late, but I'm feeling okay with it. All right. Okay, so let's continue with the basics. Relax. Don't take yourself too seriously. Create a sense of anticipation. Give them a picture. Let them meditate and see and experience what they're looking for, right? Activate. He talked about activating your audience by asking them questions, and he has some really great suggestions if you are going to do public speaking, but it's still the same interactively, right? If you've got someone in front of you that you're talking to, small group, one person, doesn't matter. When you ask questions, you activate them, right? So it engages them. I know right off the bat, if their parents always want to talk about their kids, business owners always want to talk about their businesses, maybe not in certain situations, right? But if you're around a person, if you're in there, see their car, certainly if you go to their house, look at the pictures on the wall. Look if the garage is open and you see a hot rod in the garage or golf clubs, I mean, look for things. That's one of the things that I really learned how to do, is try to be very observant. I mean, if you see a Gators lapel pin, hey, go Gators, try to find a way to connect. I've gotten great things from somebody's key ring. I mean, honestly, I've seen, you see a little dog on a key ring. Hey, do you have a dog? I mean, just ways to engage people and ask questions. All right, and it matters how we say things. I was gonna come over here and pull up a clip from a movie called Tommy Boy, but I thought, nah, it's a little racy. We want to keep this a PG. That would have been PG-13, so it wasn't bad. But I have another one that I've used in training before, and it's like, okay, so it's not just enough to say it. It's how you say things that matter. It's the words that you use that matter. So here's a good example. Looking at Stacy, and I go, oh, Stacy, you are so beautiful that you cease the hands of time. Corny, I know, but listen to another guy who hears that and goes, man, that guy was so smooth. Hey, honey, you got a face that'll stop a clock. Right. We're essentially saying the same thing, but just two different ways, right? And the Tommy Boy thing was the butcher. Have you ever seen Tommy Boy?
No.
Oh, you and I are going to have a movie night.
Okay.
We got to have a movie night.
All right.
We'll do it on the big screen, man. We'll put it on the big theater sound. So if anybody's seen Tommy Boy, it's the butcher and the bull story. It's hard for me to even think about. I could actually say it, but I know I'm not supposed to, so I'm not going to. All right. Let's see. One of the things he talked about in here was being original. And man, that really spoke to me, certainly as a man of faith, because there's a book in a book that says that I'm not supposed to conform to the world. And to be honest with you, and this is just me speaking personally, I don't want to conform to what's going on out there. I don't see a lot, like most of the tapestry that I see are things that I'm not interested in. So if there is a cool thing, remember I always see positives and things. If there's a positive in this polarized, kind of hateful place we're in, being different from that is a good thing. There's a lot of people scared and stressed right now, and I'm not saying they shouldn't be. I'm not condescending to them, but being a person of peace would definitely be recognizable. Being a person who has a joy in their life, and joy is not happiness. Happiness is an emotion. Joy is a state of mind or a state of spirit. And it's based on perspective, not circumstances. Happiness is a circumstance-driven emotion. Having a joy and seeing the good in things, that is identifiable in this world that we're living in, at least in my bubble. I mean, maybe where you live is different. I don't mean to make assumptions. Be a calm worker in the midst of the biggest storms. how easy is it to ring a bell and see all the Chicken Littles running around? The sky is falling. The sky is falling. We live in Florida. If there's a rain patch out in the water, every news station is talking. I mean, there could be spaghetti models going in 30,000 different directions. And you know the model that I'm looking at here in St. Petersburg, Florida? The one that goes right into me. So what I'm saying is that there's no shortage of people that'll be running around with their heads chopped off, the sky is falling. So be a calm worker. That not only makes you more interesting and makes us more likable because it's different, but that's what really successful people do. Really successful people, they deal with, and I know I'm bringing Sand to the beach on this, but they deal with problems like everyone else. They're just bigger, different problems. And the way that they deal with them and how they work when everything's working against them, they're a quiet, strong, steady worker. And it's that, like I said, just stay level, man. Don't get too emotional, high or low. How about this? Forgiveness. Of most of the movements that I see that are out there, it's not about forgiveness. And I just think forgiveness is more for us than anyone. I recently read a book I know I've shared with you guys. My brother gave me called Love Like You've Never Been Hurt. And I don't know what that book, I didn't even really like the book that much, to be honest with you. But when I got done with that book, Leandro, I had let go some grudges that I had held. That honestly, most people would say, hey, you're justified for holding the grudge. Might have been, but it's not good for me. So forgiveness not only will make you look different and look original, but it'll be healthy for you. So, I always feel like there's a message somewhere. If there's somebody out there who's watching this who that kind of pricked your spirit, man, I hope maybe you'll get that book. Maybe you'll find a way to let that baggage go. Because I can't tell you how much better I felt when I let that go. I actually called my daughter, told her. I called my brother, told him. It just felt like I felt renewed. And I didn't even know it. I'm not that guy, but I definitely was holding on to some stuff. Kindness and service. I know this sounds goody two-shoe, guys, but it's real. I mean, if you're kind and you're serving people, you're going to be a minority. It just is what it is. How about understanding different viewpoints, being tolerant and understanding that people have different backgrounds and different socioeconomic conditions and different geographical, cultural conditions that cause their perspective to be different. And I'm really shocked and amazed that we've gotten to the point where this isn't to me, it doesn't feel like a free speech society, because I feel like people get really angry if they don't agree with you. And I think if we can be a group of people who are dedicated to being understanding and tolerant, I don't even think tolerant's a word, because that kind of seems condescending, like I should tolerate it. It's like their idea is just as good as mine, right? So anyway, being understanding and putting the concerns of others in front of our own. I mean, again, these are not things that I can do well every day, but I honestly, I put a line on this because I'm going to pull just those bullet points out. Being at peace, having a joy, being calm in the storm, being a person that forgives, serving and being kind to people. I mean, that's easy for me, actually. Understanding different viewpoints is fairly easy for me. But if this is on a mirror, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to have it in my office so I can look at it every day, because I know I'm not going to hit on all these all the time. But if I see it, man, Stacy talks a lot about being intentional, right? And what a difference that makes. So great stories. He brings up, to be a good connector, you have to have great stories. And, I'll say it again, whatever you overcome becomes a story. I remember when I went on my first missions trip, and it was a couple years before I went on another one. And I remember telling Stacy in that time, I looked at her and I go, I need another story. Like, that story got stale, and it's never stale. I mean, miracles happened on that week. Don't get me wrong, but I felt like I was ready for a new story. I was ready for a new challenge. Sometimes we choose those challenges, like the missions trips, and they are a challenge. They're wonderful, but they're a challenge. Sometimes the challenge chooses us, but it's how we respond in those challenges. So understand that what we overcome becomes our story. Plug into whatever you're interested in. Plug into whatever you're interested in so that you can hear others' stories, right? That not only motivate us, but then we can also use it, right? I mean, there's certain things that has never happened to me, but if someone brings it up, it's like, man, I've never been through that, but you know, my brother has, and I saw him go through it, and here's what he did, and here's what I saw, right? So it goes to exposing yourself and being vulnerable and plugging in and ignoring that kind of natural thought that you want to contract. Certainly when the world's going crazy like it is now, that's my natural inclination, is to be recluse and to, as for me in my house, and just stay in my bubble. And I have to fight against that, because if I'm in my bubble, I'm in my own world. And if I'm in my own world, we learned that I can't get into anybody else's world and find out what's important to them. Again, this is about sales, but it's about life. I mean, when I read these, I'm more thinking of my kids than I am prospects, to be honest with you, because I want to connect with them. And, you know, I guess I passed over it, but, you know, we have to go where they are. My mother didn't text for years, and so we didn't communicate. That's my fault. Like, I should have known. She's still using a rotary phone. But I have, and do it all the time. I'll text Catherine when she's in the house. James is upstairs. If he shoots me a text, I don't go, hey, you're in the house, come down here. I shoot him a text back. Why? Because that's where he's at. I don't really have, James, you might be watching this. I don't really have a ton of interest in some of the games that he plays, but he does. So it matters. Because it matters to him, it matters to me. So that to me, it's like, if it's good enough for my kids, it's like, if I can get it there, I can get it everywhere, right? So anyway, expose yourself, be vulnerable. It's my opinion that's where truth is found. Think of meetings where addicts go and open up, and open up with our own issues. You know, I told somebody once, I was like, you got to share your weaknesses with your people. And he's like, then they'll know what my weaknesses are. And I go, dude, they already know. When you share it, all you're doing is letting them know that you know. Does that make sense? So be open. I think that if we're not authentic, if we're not open, if we're not looking to be deliberately original and different than the world around us, we will blend in with tapestry and not be able to connect with people. We have to get out of that, go where they're at, right? Ask great questions, be a great listener, have enough of a knowledge to be able to guide, like I said, like a tour guide. No, walk this way. Here's where you go. And I think that's when we start making a connection. And listen, making a sale and making a connection are two different things. You can make a sale without making a connection, but that might be the only one that you make with that person. When you make a connection, you're building a relationship. And to be honest with you, most of the time that relationship is more valuable than the 20, 30, or 40% we're making on their purchase. Certainly when you get the story of, hey, my daughter's teacher called, asked what's different, has never seen her more focused, a nonverbal autistic child beginning to speak, a lady down to hadn't slept in 13 years, a full night. I mean, when that starts coming in and that becomes your why, then this all becomes kind of natural. Because if your approach is right, where the bat meets the ball is just going to happen, right? It's just going to happen. All right. Errors, omissions, cares, concerns. I didn't mean to be this long today.
Yes. Victor Christia shared with us, did you know kicking a flat tire won't inflate it?
I love that. I love that. Thankfully, I've never done that. Can you imagine? It's like, well, I thought so. I tried it. I liked, you can't steer a parked car. I used to say to people all the time, like, man, look at this and that. And it's like, how many dials you make? How many appointments do you have? None. What do you expect me to do? Car's not moving. I can't steer it. You know, anybody else, anything else? That's all I got. Yeah. Oh, page 193. I put something in here. Hold on. Excuse me. I got to get better at my craft. Oh, you know what? So it has two lists here, and it's obvious which is the good list and which is the bad list, but just listen to the words in like warm, honest, friendly, exciting, interesting, knowledgeable, organized, creative, confident, inspiring, open, authentic, informal, funny. All of them make you feel good, don't they? Warm and fuzzy. Listen to this. Pompous, vague, flat, complex, patronizing, nervous, It's like the words have sharper letters in them. I don't know why it's affecting me this. Nervous, formal, irrelevant, stuffy, monotonous, intense, closed. Those are obviously the bad things. Yeah. So anyway, all right. If we don't have any further ados to pay, I think that's it. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. We went a little long. I'm trying to keep these a little shorter, but I got into, I guess, you know, time matters less than message. I mean, I guess to a point, right? Did you read the thing where John was talking about everybody was getting, there was like a golf tournament, and then there was like 2 hours of presentation, and he was introduced as the keynote speaker, and he noticed that everybody's like, you know, their body language is horrible. They've just really checked out, and he walks up to the podium and he goes, "My name's John Maxwell, and I'm your keynote speaker tonight. My speech is everything rises and falls on leadership. Good night and thank you." He sat down, and there was a pause of silence, and then the whole place erupted in a standing ovation. He does suggest that you don't do that. He says in his 39 years of speaking, that's the only time he's ever delivered a one-line speech. Really. Such a charming guy. He's even more charming because I met him, and he's actually, I don't know if I met his representative or him. Seeing it's John, I probably met him, but he's just like he is in the book. Smiley, joyful. He's got this deep voice that brings you in. You feel like you're nuzzling up in mother's, you know, breast. That's good. All right, you guys, thank you so much for joining today. I know it's helping some people. Thank you guys for those of you who are reaching out and letting me know that this is helpful. It's definitely energetic for me. It's very hard not having a crowd in front of me. I'm definitely a counterpuncher. I mean, I read energy, and that's really what keeps me popping. But this has been working good. Thank you, Leandro, for being here. It definitely helps that get a little reaction. And those of you who use your camera, listen, I'm going to say it right now. Those of you who don't use your camera, Victor Cristia, you're not connecting, man. You got to connect visually, bro. I got to see you. Hopefully next time I tell you what, I'll put on some makeup. You can put on some makeup. We can look good together, my friend. Bye, you guys.